どうも、勝手に電力2.0の全部始めたいと思います。今日1207回目というところで、このリニアブル2023というところのですね、続きのところを少し話したいなと思ってるんですけども、やっぱりですね、この太陽光風力っていうんですけども、やっぱりこの直近はですね、かなりやっぱり太陽光っていうところに、かなり焦点の当てられたところになってるなっていうところがわかるので、このあたりは少しお話しさせてもらおうかなと思ってます。でチャプター1でエレクトリシティはですね、Global Forecast Summary で2023 marks a step change for renewable power growth over the next 5 years ということで、Renewable electricity capacity additions reached estimated 507 gigawatts in 2023, almost 50% higher than in 2022, with continuous policy support in more than 130 countries. Spurring significant change in the global growth trend, this worldwide acceleration in 2023 was driven mainly by year-on-year expansion in the People's Republic of China's China booming market for solar PV and wind. Renewable power capacity additions will continue to increase in next 5 years, with solar PV and wind accounting for a record 96% of it because their generation costs are lower than for both fossil and non-fossil alternatives in most countries, and policies continue to support them. ということで、Renewable Electricity Capacity Additions by Technology and Segment ということで、これ見たらですね、この色を見ればわかるんですけど、ソーラー PV のところの容量。容量なので、キロワットアワーに直すともうちょっと減ってくるんですけども、どれだけ導入されていくかっていう規模の話でいくと、圧倒的にですね、この、どのケースでもですね、メインケースっていうところを見ても、太陽光が多いですし、その次にはウィンドが来ると、風力が来るというような状況になっていると。Solar PV and wind additions are forecast to more than double by 2028 compared with 2022, continuously breaking records over the forecast period to reach almost 710 gigawatts at the same time. Hydropower and bioenergy capacity addition will be lower than during the last 5 years. ということで、まさにこれ見ると、水力とバイオエナジーっていうのは、この5以上、ここ直近の5年よりも低いかもしれないってことですね。Development in emerging economies decelerate, especially China. Renewable overtake coal in early 2025 to become the largest energy source for electricity generation globally. まさに化石燃料が、再エネが化石燃料を超えるとですね。By 2028, potential renewable electricity generation is expected to reach around 14,040 terawatt hour and increase almost 70% from 2022 over the next 5 years. Several renewable energy milestones could be achieved. In 2024, variable renewable generation surpass hydropower. まず水力超えますよね。In 2025, renewable surpass coal-fired electricity generation. 次に石炭超えますよね。In 2025, wind surpass nuclear electricity generation. In 2026, solar PV surpass nuclear electricity generation. ソーラーが、原子力超えますよね。2028, solar PV surpass wind electricity generation ということで、ある意味風力っていうところが、実はヨーロッパを中心にかなり、流行っているんですけど、ソーラーが実は2028年に超えるんじゃないかというところになっています。Electricity generations by technology 2020s and to 2028ということで、このまさに上がり方を見るとですね、variable energies っていうところと all renewable っていうところで、変動型が増えますよねって話と、その分、リニューアブル増えますよねって、これを牽引しているのが、ギュギュギュギュって上がっている太陽光が一番多くて、その次に風力が上がっているというような状況になると。Over the forecast period, the potential renewable electricity generation growth exceeds global demand growth, indicating a slow decline in coal-based generation, while natural gas remains stable. ガスは結構ステーブルですね。In 28, renewable energy sources account for 42% of global electricity generation, with the wind and solar PV share making up 25%. In 2028, hydropower remains the largest renewable energy source. However, renewable electricity generation needs to expand more quickly in many countries. See net zero emission by 2050 scenario tracking section in this chapter. While renewable are currently the largest energy source for electricity generation in 57 countries, most thanks to hydropower, these countries represent just 14% of global power demand. By 2028, 68 countries will have renewables as their main power generation source, but still only account for 17% of global demand. China is the driver's seat. China's renewable electricity capacity grows triples in the next 5 years, compared with the previous five, with the country accounting for the unprecedented 56% of global expansion. すごいですね。半分はもう中国だって。Over 2023 to 2028, China will deploy almost 4 times more renewable capacity than the European Union and 5 times more than the United States, which will remain the second and third largest global market. The Chinese government's net zero by 2060 target, supported by incentives under the 14th five-year plan 2021 to 2025, and the ample availability of local manufactured equipment and low-cost financing stimulate the country's renewable power expansion over the forecast period. Renewable electricity capacity growth by country region main case. ということで、チャイナがドーンとこの2000とかも数が全然違ってくるんですね。で、ここで例えば ASEAN っていうところは、どうしてもまだ量としては少ないんですけども、実際に比べるところ EU だとか、US、インディアっていうところになってくるので、それに対してはラテンアメリカが結構多いですけども、その次に出てくるようなところになると。Meanwhile, expansion accelerates in the United States and the European Union thanks to the US Inflation Reduction Act and country-level policy incentives supporting EU decarbonization and energy security targets. In India, progressive policy improvements to limit the auction participation, financing, and distributed solar PV challenges pay off with faster renewable power growth through 2028. In Latin America, high retail prices spur distributed solar PV system build-outs and supportive policies for utility-scale installation in Brazil boost renewable energy growth to new heights. やっぱりブラジルも結構注意ですね。Renewable energy expansion also accelerate in the Middle East and North Africa, owing mostly to policy incentives that take advantage of cost competitiveness of solar PV and onshore wind power. Also, renewable capacity increases more quickly in sub-Saharan Africa. The region still underperforms, consisting its resource potential and electrification needs. アフリカっていうのはやっぱりいまいち進まないところですね。The forecast has been revised upwards, but country and technology trends vary. We have revised the global renewable 2023 forecast up by 33% from the December 2022 publication. For most countries and regions, this revision reflects policy changes and improves economics for large-scale wind and solar PV projects, but also faster consumer adoption by distributed PV system in response to higher electricity prices. Overall, China accounts for the most significant upward revisions for all technologies except bioenergy for power, for which reduced government support. Feedstocks limitation and complicated logistics remain challenging. Renewable electricity capacity forecast revisions by country 2023-2027, renewables 2023 versus renewable 2022ってことで、実際に2020年の予測から2023年どのぐらい増えたかみたいなところで実はガンとやっぱり増えているっていうところになってますと。で、実際にどの国でどうなったか、アップワードリビジョンとダウンワードリビジョンで増えたところはチャイナっていうところが圧倒的に多くて、減ったっていうところが others っていうところになるのかなっていうところですね。Despite regulatory change to its net metering scheme, Brazil's distributed PV capacity growth is exceeding our expectation, leading to noticeable upward revision. For other countries, a more optimistic outlook results from policy improvements for auction design and permitting and growth corporate PPA market in Germany. Positive impacts of IRA incentives in the United States and speedier, streamlined renewable energy auction in India. Conversely, we have revised down the forecast for Korea because the government's policy focus has shifted from renewable energy to nuclear energy. 韓国はかなり原子力の振ったんですね。Reducing solar PV targets. We have also reined in forecast growth for other markets compared with last year's outlook. For Spain, because renewable energy auctions have been significantly undersubscribed. For Australia, due to continued policy uncertainty following early achievement of its large-scale renewable energy targets. For Oman, because development times frame for large-scale renewable energy projects have been longer than expected, including for green hydrogen and for multiple ASEAN countries as a result of sustained policy uncertainty, as well as overall power supply gluts limiting additional renewable deployment in the short term. China's substantial upwards forecast revision for PV hides slower progress in other countries. すごいですね。チャイナが伸びれば他のところの減りっていうのはわかんないってことですね。あんまり。Overall, China's forecast have been revised up by 64% thanks to the country's improved policy environment and the growing economic attractiveness of solar PV and wind systems. For other countries, however, this year's forecast is almost 7% higher than our December 2022 outlook. China accounts for almost 90% of the global upward forecast revision, consisting mainly of solar PV. In fact, its solar PV manufacturing capability have almost doubled since last year, creating a global supply glut. This has reduced local module prices by nearly 50% from January to December 2023, increasing the economic attractiveness of both utility scale and distributed solar PV projects. Thus, even with the phase out of subsidies, developers have been accelerating the deployment of utility scale and commercial solar PV application to meet growing power demand because it is more affordable than investing in new and existing coal and gas-fired generation. In addition, China's government has clarified its green certificate rules, providing additional revenues for renewable energy projects. Similar policy improvement also support a high wind forecast but longer project lead time, especially for the growing offshore wind market limits upward revision. Rapid government's responses to grid connection permitting policy and financing challenges can accelerate renewable energy growth. In the main case, taking country-specific challenges that hamper faster renewable energy expansion into account, we forecast that almost 3,700 gigawatts of new renewable energy capacity will become operational worldwide over the next 5 years. In contrast, in our accelerated case, we assume that governments overcome these challenges and implement existing policy more quickly. These challenges fall into four main categories. First, policy uncertainties are delayed policy responses to the new microeconomic environment encompassing inflexible auction design. During the energy crisis, government intervened in energy markets to protect consumers from high prices. While these interventions were justified, they also create uncertainty for investors over the future investment environment in the electricity sector. The microeconomic changes also drove up cost and contrast prices for wind and solar PV projects, and the lack of reference price adjustment and contrast price indexation methodologies reduced the bankability of projects most in advanced economies. Meanwhile, emerging economies have been slow to develop strong renewable energy targets and clear incentive schemes. While renewable energy projects, especially solar PV and wind, are already more affordable than fossil fuel-based alternatives, slower than expected demand growth has resulted in the overcapacity of young coal and gas grids in many emerging economies, creating little need for additional capacity. The second problem is insufficient investment in grid infrastructure. やっぱり系統に対する送電線に対する投資って大事ですね。which has been preventing further expansion today, more than 3,000 gigawatts of renewable generation capacity and in grid fees. Half of these projects are in advanced stage of state development. This challenge holds true for both advanced economic and emerging and developing countries. Development lead times for grid infrastructure improvements and significantly longer than for wind and solar PV projects. The third challenge involved permitting. The amount of time required to obtain permits can range from 1 to 5 years for global mounted solar PV projects, 2 to 9 years for onshore wind, and 9 years of average of for offshore wind project. やっぱり期間ですよね、許可までの。Delays resulting from complex and lengthy authorization procedures are slowing project pipeline growth, limiting participation in renewable energy auctions, raising project risk and cost, and ultimately weaken project economics. The fourth obstacle is insufficient financing in developing countries, mitigating risks in high-risk countries through concessional financing countries to be challenging become because of ongoing policy uncertainties and implementation challenge, for instance, in Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria. In many developing countries, government-owned utilities are under financial stress, and the weighted average cost of capital WACC can be 2 or 3 times higher than in major renewable energy markets, reducing project bankability. Every percentage point decline in the WACC reduce wind and solar PV generation costs by at least 8%. Renewable capacity growth by technology 25, 2028で、結局 PV のところの、このユーティリティパターンだったり、ディストリビューティってところがやっぱり増えていくっていう状況にはなりますと。Government has multiple options to address these challenges in the short term to unlock 21% more renewable capacity in the accelerated case, with almost 4,500 gigawatts becoming operational in the next 5 years. In our accelerated case forecast, governments can achieve important policy improvements by simplifying permitting procedure and or setting clear permitting timelines, identifying preferential areas for renewable energy projects to fast-track permitting, and removing certain permitting requirements for small renewable power projects, or increasing the minimum capacity requirements for environmental impact assessment without compromising strong sustainability measures. Considering that new grid infrastructure often takes 5 to 15 years to plan, compared with 1 to 5 years for new renewable energy projects. Aligning and integrating planning and execution of transmission and distribution grid projects with board long-term energy planning processes, and ensuring that regulatory risk assessments allowed for anticipatory investment, standardizing power purchase contract and backing them up with government guarantees, especially for publicly owned utility to reduce financial risk for off-takers. Adapting auction design to the new microeconomic environment by indexing contrast prices to various microeconomic indicators specific to each renewable technology, such as relevant commodity prices, inflation, and interest rate for different stages of project deployment. Implementing policies and regulatory reforms to de-risk renewable energy investment and reducing the cost financing, especially in AMDEs. In our accelerated case, offshore wind and utility scale solar PV together have the largest upside potential. やっぱり大きなオフシェアの洋上風力と実際に大きいユーティリティスケールの PV と。Upside potential, simplifying permitting and adapting auction design would lead to higher auction subscription and thus faster deployment of utility scale solar PV and wind power plants, as with higher investment in transmission and distribution grids. For distributed solar PV, also we have also revised our forecast upwards to reflect policy improvements and higher retail prices for electricity. The pace of consumer adoption is always a forecast uncertainty, especially in the high interest rate environment. Our accelerating case therefore assumed faster adoption of residential and commercial solar PV sectors to the prolongation of high retail electricity prices and government support for low-cost financing. Net zero emission by 2050 scenario tracking. The tripling goal is within reach, but more effort is needed. Prior to the COP28 climate change conference in Dubai, the International Energy Agency urged governments to support 5 pillars for action by 2030, among them the goal of tripling global renewable power capacity. Several of the IEA priorities were reflected in the global stock take text agreed by the 198 governments at COP28, including the tripling renewable goals. Tripling global renewable capacity from 2022 levels by 2030 would take it to 11,000 gigawatts, in line with the IEA net zero emission by 2050 scenario. Under existing policies and market conditions, global renewable capacity is forecast to reach 7,300 gigawatts by 2028. In our main case, also this growth means that renewables account for almost all new added power capacity worldwide. Its trajectory would see global capacity increase to 2.5 times its current level by 2030, falling short of the tripling goal. In our accelerating case forecast, global cumulative capacity more than doubles to reach over the 8,130 gigawatts by 2028, putting the world nearly on track to meet the global tripling pledge. Renewable capacity grows from 2022 to 2030 and the gap to global tripling renewable ってことで、実際にこの2022年までの、導入量と2023から2030のグローバルキャパシティのグロースっていうところに比べてかなり伸ばしはする 2.5x なんですけど、さらに2030のトリプルギャップっていうのがまだ出てくるっていうことですね。2023, G20 countries collectively accounted for almost 90% of global cumulative renewable power capacity. In September 2023, G20 leaders declared their willingness to pursue and encourage efforts to bring the renewable energy capacity globally through existing targets and policies, in line with national circumstances by 2030. Accordingly, there have potential to significantly contribute to global tripling of renewables through full and faster implementation of existing policies and targets. However, stronger policy efforts are needed in many other countries. Renewable energy expansion in 2023 was heavily concentrated in just 10 countries, responsible for 80% of global annual additions. To achieve a triple of global renewable capacity, a much faster deployment rate is necessary in numerous other nations. Moreover, many emerging and developing economies rely primarily on hydropower. 水力に頼るんですね。This implies that solar PV and wind must grow significantly more than threefold by 2030 to meet the global triple goal. Achieving this will demand new policy tailored to the unique circumstances and requirements of emerging and developing nations. Relative to our accelerated case projection for renewable capacity in 2028, reaching the triple of renewables by 2030 would necessitate the commissioning of almost 3,000 gigawatts of new renewable capacity in 2029 and 2030. Average annual renewable capacity additions in 2029 to 2030 would therefore have to be 165% higher than in 27 to 28. The last 2 years of our accelerated case forecast, cumulative renewable electricity capacity in the accelerated case 2022 to 2028 and the net zero scenario 2030。いうところで、これも見ても PV と Window っていうところが多く占めますよねと。その次にハイドロ、水力っていうのは、ある意味、ちょっとずつ増やしていくっていう状況になってますと。で、実際にこの G20、G7 っていうところで見ていくと、やっぱりこの G20 の割合っていうのはめちゃくちゃ大きくなってくる。Gaps also vary significantly by technology for solar PV additions needed to increase just 35% in 2029 and 2030, while for wind they would need to double. For hydropower and other renewable annual addition need to triple compared with 2027 and 2028. Average annual renewable electricity capacity additions and gap to INZ シナリオということで、実際にこの NZ シナリオとのギャップと accelerated case ということで、実際にこのネットゼロのシナリオになってくると、もうソーラーがめちゃくちゃアディションしていかなきゃいけないっていう状況になってくると。Asia Pacific, renewable capacity is expected to increase by almost 430 gigawatts over 2023 to 2028, 73% growth from 2022. Solar PV makes up over two-thirds of the expansion mostly and utility scale application. India will account for half of the region's growth with the association of South Asian nation, ASEAN contributing 14%、ASEAN は14%ぐらいなんですね。And Japan 11%なので、日本よりちょっと大きめぐらいってことですね。By 2028, annual Asia Pacific renewable energy capacity growth is expected to almost double from the 2022 level, but its contribution to global expansion remains the same. Overall, our forecast is mostly unchanged from last year, as downward revisions for Korea and Australia are offset by a more positive outlook for India and Japan. India is forecast added 205 gigawatts over 2023 to 2028, doubling 2022's cumulative installed capacity, making it the world's third largest market for renewable. もう3番手のラージマーケットですね。The announcement of a higher auction volume and the introduction of the closed enveloped bidding process for wind, improvement in grid access rules for commercial distributed PV, the settlement of majority of the overdue payments to the generator led to 3% upwards forecast revision. Undertaken auction are expected to help India advance towards its goal of installing 500 gigawatts of non-fossil based capacity by 2030. In Japan, renewable energy deployment is fueled primarily by projects awarded under the previous feed-in tariff scheme and the newly introduced feed-in premium (FIP) mechanism. Oversubscription in the first PIP auction in 22, coupled with faster than expected growth of the corporate PPA market, has resulted in the forecast revision of close to 15% Asia Pacific renewable capacity addition 2011 to 2028ということで、実際にここのところの増え方っていうところで、APAC っていうこのウィンド、インディアっていうところはめちゃくちゃ多いですし、実際に、ここの増え方っていうのも、ハイドロよりもこの色ですね、見たら、ウィンドが多かったり、PV が多かったりしているというような状況で、PV ディストリビュートで、かなりですね、結局太陽光がめちゃくちゃ有料としては多いと。Conversely, we are reserving Korea's forecast down by over 40% and Australia's down by over 10%. In Korea, this revision results mainly from the government's decision to lower the renewable energy targets for 2030 from 30 to 22%. This shift reflects the strategic decision to enlarge the role of nuclear power in the country's energy transition. In addition, auction, which is the primary mechanism to support renewable energy growth, continued to significantly undersubscribed in 2023. In Australia, a lack of new federal incentive and rising investment costs have delayed the development of new projects, notably the distributed PV segment, which has been primarily source of growth in Australia in recent years, is forecast to experience faster than anticipated decline in installation due to saturation of the power system and increasing grid integration challenge. For the ASEAN region, our forecast is mostly unchanged from last year, 変わってないんですね。In Indonesia, the government issued a decree in 2022 to establish a policy framework for a new auction-based renewable energy support system. However, the detailed regulations necessary from procurement and project development were still pending as October 2023, which has delayed the expected positive impact of the new policy. ポリシーがやっぱりダメなんです、インドネシア。In Vietnam, the much anticipated new national electricity development plan, which includes renewable capacity targets for 2030, has been adopted. The plan assumes significant deployment of wind capacity. However, the government has not addressed the gap in policy support present since 2021, which is impeding project deployment. Meanwhile, the Philippines introduced an auction program in 22 that is expected to significantly boost the utility scale PV and onshore wind growth, and also the government has announced ambitious auction volume targets. Rapid deployment is being hampered by delay in developing the transmission system. In Thailand, the continued absence of substantial policy support has limited the pace of renewable energy growth, with only modest addition expected for the distributed PV segment. In the accelerating case, Asia Pacific renewable energy growth in 2023 to 2028 could surpass main case projection by more than 40%, which is nearly double the global average. The ASEAN region and India has the greatest potential for acceleration. For India, its already dynamic development could jump over almost 45% if policymakers address the poor financial performance of utility companies and sluggish distributed PV deployment and facilitate wind project deployment. Upside potential for the Asian region is even more significant, close to 60% of giving it one of the highest growth possibility globally. However, raising this potential will require more ambitious renewable energy target and the shift implementation of long-term transparent and competitive support policies. っていうところで、fossil fuel-based overcapacity is significant impediment ASEAN renewable energy development while system integration changes remain limited. Existing coal and gas-fired power plants overcapacity in some ASEAN countries, including Indonesia and Philippines, Thailand, and Malaysia, remains a major obstacle to faster renewable energy deployment. Over the last decade, many countries in the region overinvested in conventional generation assets, mainly coal farm, まさに石炭ですね, based on the optimistic power demand projections and conservative safety margin for installed capacity. As a result, today reserved margin excess of dispatchable capacity over peak demand in the region of exceed 50% and reached over 90% in India. The region also has been a very young fossil fuel fire-free capable of meeting electricity demand even in 2028 with more under development. Many of these assets have entered fixed or take-or pay contract with utility companies to secure financing. Utilities bound by legacy supply contracts for the next 10 to 15 years have little finance incentive to contract new renewable power, as they obliged to compensate fossil fuel plant operators for any displaced generation. This would create additional financial stress for multiple utilities in the region. Vietnam remains an exception. 別のだけと例外なんですね。Having dynamic demand growth that allows the public utility to procure power from all sources, with cost being the primary criterion. Finding solutions to these complex issues requires multi-dimensional approach aiming at coordinating an ordinary transition. It is necessary to accelerate renewable energy growth to achieve climate goals with, at the time, acknowledge the limited procurement capabilities of utility companies and alleviating the risk of many fossil fuel plants becoming standard asset.